Welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Carol Looper. I'm a member of CMC's board, and I used to be a reporter. I'm retired, but oftentimes I'm still thinking like a reporter. One doesn't retire from reporting. I am a news junkie. Great to see everyone here today. Today's CMC's forum celebrates the legacy of Charles Y. and Francis N. Lazarus, revisiting Columbus history. From Wrecking Ball to Hamilton, 50 Years of CAPA is sponsored by the Dispatch Media Group, Puffin Foundation West, the Tom Daly Foundation, and in partnership with Greater Columbus Sister Cities International. Each is represented here by many friends and associates. Please help me thank them. And Mr. Daly, time to introduce you. Tom Daly, founder and chair of the Tom E. Daly Foundation, will introduce our speakers. All yours.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Carol, and thank you, Jane. I'm very pleased to be here along with my spouse, Sung, on behalf of our foundation and also on behalf of our many employees at Zoop, some of whom have joined us here today, and to introduce this forum. Our foundation is pleased to support the Columbus Metropolitan Club, engaging in the community in important conversation each week. And today we're honored to help recognize and celebrate CAPA's 50 years of arts in the city. We were also involved as one of the presenting sponsors a couple of weeks ago at the wonderful organ concert with Clark Wilson and Simon Gladhill, and that was just a fantastic time. If it weren't for a few tenacious leaders, our flourishing downtown art scene would be a far different place today. Let's welcome the people who make and have helped make theaters and arts in Columbus a huge success. So I'd like to introduce the president and CEO of CAPA, Chad Whittington. Our former mayor and now partner in charge of the government law group at Ice Miller, Michael Coleman. A CAPA co-founder and longtime board member, Lawrence Fisher. And our host, the editorial page editor at the Columbus Dispatch, Mary Yost. So, and Mary, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Tom. We could probably spend our whole time today just hearing from Larry Fisher about his experience. He has not only helped found CAPA, but he's been on the board the entire time. 50 years on the board of this organization. Yes, thank you. But we'll try to narrow it down to hear just a few key points from your perspective. And I think, first of all, when you and the other co-founders, and I think one of them might be here with us today, Scott Whitlock. Thank you. What did you and your co-founders think you were creating?
Well, I think to answer that, I almost have to tell you what the situation was and what little time we had to think about those things. There were four of us: Bob Carlsberger, a leading architect, Jean Whalen, a musician and the wife of the Columbus Symphony Orchestra music director and conductor, Evan Whalen, and Scott Whitlock, myself, two attorneys, two very young attorneys. We were 28 years old at the time. The four of us met for the first time 10 days before the demolition of the Ohio Theater was to begin. The Ohio and the adjacent building were owned by developers who had already had made the drawings for the construction of a high-rise building. The project was ready to go. All of the fixtures inside the building had been sold to another group of people who had scheduled a tag sale, a giant tag sale auction. And as a matter of fact, when we were involved at that time, every chandelier, every sconce, every seat, everything in the theater had a tag hanging on it. In those 10 days, from the time we met, we published a full-page announcement of the problem in both of the daily newspapers. A copy of that is actually sitting out on the registration desk. You can see it on your way out if you haven't seen it coming in. We formed CAPA. We raised the money to buy an option to purchase the 2 buildings, and we raised the money to buy back all of the fixtures that had been sold. Then, in the ensuing 2.5 months, with help from the likes of Bob Lazarus, Professor Phil Jastrom from OSU, John Galbraith, and many others, we raised enough money to cover the first year's operating deficit, and we arranged for CAPA to borrow the entire purchase price, and we hired a staff of 4 to operate the theater. Now, you would think that during such a hectic time, there would be no time to think. But urgency seemed to have sharpened our thinking. And I tell you that because one of the things that I personally am most proud of is that in that time, when we created the organization, we could see that it was going to be a tool for the performing arts. A theater is basically a critically important tool for putting on great types of performing art. And basically, we were thinking we were going to convert it, as we did, into a performing arts center. And so we did not name the organization the Ohio Theater Association. We named it the Columbus Association for the Performing Arts. And I am equally proud of the fact, about which I had less to do with, a smaller share of the work, but over the last 50 years, CAPA has truly grown into its name.
Very good, thank you. Now, Larry's not the only one who has a long association with CAPA. Chad, you literally started sweeping the floors there in 1998, I believe. And your love affair with CAPA has lasted longer than a lot of marriages. How has your relationship with CAPA continued for so long?
Well, my wife's here, so I'll talk about CAPA, but not marriages today. It's a great organization. CAPA is just a wonderful organization. That's why I've stayed around so long in a thriving community. I say often that I feel so privileged to watch an organization and be a part of an organization like CAPA that has grown so much. But in a city like Columbus, if you think about how much we have changed, for me it's a 20-year perspective. It's incredible, and to be a small piece of it with my roles at CAPA, but to be able to watch the larger success that we've had. And of course the Blue Jackets now, a great new exciting chapter for us. But that's kept me at the organization so long. And great staff has been a part of it as well. I've worked under 2 incredible leaders at CAPA, Bill Connor and Doug Kreidler, amazing staff. We've got 2 tables of staff and board members over here. It's really, you take all those things and you get into an organization like CAPA and see the impact that we can have on the community, and you just want to be a part of it for as long as you can. And I've been lucky now for 20 years to be able to do that.
Wow. So, yes. Mayor Coleman, when you're in charge of a city like the size of Columbus, it's a big job. You've got, city infrastructure, public safety, community relations, economic development, and more. How, in addition to all of that, did you view your role in promoting the arts? Why was that something that was important, and what role did CAPA play in, well, let's just stop there. Your role in promoting the arts, why is that something that, as mayor, you cared about?
Well, I have always viewed the arts as something that provides for a greater quality of life for its citizens. In every way. It's the glue that brings things together. But I take it a bit further in that I view the arts as a tool for economic development, a tool to educate our children and to see them grow in a great way. And with the Lincoln Theater, I'll wait for the next question. With the Lincoln Theater, it was the catalyst for not just rejuvenating the theater, but rejuvenating an entire part of the city of Columbus that had a historic renovation followed historic neglect. And the theater turned that around in a way that if you could have seen what it was and to know where it is today, and seeing where it is today, it is a wonderful addition to that community and has driven new housing, new jobs, new opportunities, a new life, a great hope for that neighborhood, for the Near East Side. But I can talk more about it if you ask me the question.
Well, you jumped ahead. But
I would add to that Mayor Coleman was in fact the locomotive that drove the restoration of the Lincoln Theater.
Oh, the streetcar, right?
and the 10th anniversary was just celebrated this past Sunday of the reopening. So yes,
Yep.
Congratulations on doing that. I would like to, you mentioned the Lincoln Theater, but there are a number of properties. Larry talked about CAPA has grown into its name. It's more than just the Ohio Theater. CAPA owns the Palace, the Southern, the Lincoln, and even the Schubert Theater in New Haven, Connecticut. Chad, I wanted to ask you, has CAPA reached its capacity for owning and managing theaters, or is there more it could or should take on?
No, I don't think we've reached our capacity. CAPA is able to continue to grow as our community grows. And actually, one of our good problems to have right now is it's tough to schedule our theaters. When you look at the demand from local groups, from national acts that want to come into our theaters, there's friction in trying to figure out where to put everybody and give them the weeks they want and the number of weeks they want. Again, it's a great indication of the growth in our city, the demand for the arts, but it also means over the long term, we need to create more arts spaces in our community. Does it mean a new theater at some point in our future? Probably. I don't know when that time is, but something in the 1,500 seat range, a true concert hall, I think that is in the future of Columbus, and I don't think that's the last opportunity we're going to have for growth in art spaces. So no, absolutely, CAPA wants to be a part of that, and we want to see our city continue to grow and be able to offer more experiences. I think about Columbus and the arts that takes place here. One of the greatest things to say is that it's impossible to keep up with it all. And I don't think 20 years ago maybe you would have said the same thing. So it's a great time to be in Columbus if you're a part of the arts community.
I would add to that, when we did the Southern Theater, it took us 13 years from the time the shell of the theater was donated to CAPA until we had the refurbishing done and the theater reopened. And throughout that whole time, the main question that came from the community is, do we really need another theater? We already have the Ohio, we have the Palace. Why do we need the Southern Theater? Where is the Southern Theater? What's it going to do anyway? We're never going to be able to use it enough. And I can tell you, if you want to book a weekend in the Southern Theater, you're out of luck now because it's full.
Wow, that's great. So Larry, I was going to ask what the most surprising development or initiative was that you've seen in the 50 years of CAPA so far. I don't know if the Southern was that, or what were some of the most challenging obstacles that CAPA had to overcome?
Well, for surprise, the greatest surprise and I suppose it was also a big obstacle that we did overcome, came right away. And that is right after we had purchased the option. Back in 1969, we were, putting together the arrangements to, be able to borrow the money and all of that to do the closing and actually own the theater. We looked around right away around the country about, well, what do other people do that have purchased an American movie palace and with the intentions of converting it into a performing arts center? And to our great surprise, we found nobody had ever done that in the United States. So that was quite a surprise. And in fact, the outgrowth of that was that the Ohio Theater was named as a national landmark. President Ford came out to do the actual dedication part. And to remind you that there are tens of thousands, or maybe more, buildings in the United States on the National Register of Historic Places. That does not make them a national landmark. There are, in the state of Ohio, probably 24 buildings that are national landmarks, and more than half of them are that because they were residents of presidents. We've had a lot of presidents in Ohio that have had their hometowns. So for really special buildings, it's very, very difficult to become a national landmark. Ford Theater in Washington, D.C. is a national landmark for obvious reasons. The Ohio was selected as that because it was a good example of an American movie palace, but mostly because it was the first one in the United States ever converted into a performing arts center. So there have been quite a few afterwards, but talk about a surprise. we had a surprise.
Oh, that's great. And so that's not the only area where CAPA has been a pioneer. I think, Chad, another area has been in the development of the shared services agreements that you have with other arts organizations, including Opera Columbus and the Symphony, and I think even Franklin Park Conservatory. Can you tell us a little bit about how did that line of business come about, and how important has that been not only to sustain and grow CAPA, but also the organizations that it serves?
Yeah, shared services really evolved out of financial necessity. There were times when groups, from an administrative perspective, their expenses were weighing on them as organizations, and in many cases, that led them to come to CAPA and say, how can we work together and lower our expense? So that's why it started, but that's not why the model has been successful. It's been successful because it makes good financial sense, not only for the partner groups that we work with, but for CAPA as well. Take administrative employees, we can go out and spend more money cumulatively than we could individually as organizations, again, get a higher level of expertise. We've got a great staff at CAPA, and at the same time save all of us money. And what does that allow us to do? And what does that allow the partner organizations to do? To focus on the artistic product that they're creating for the community. So we handle administrative things so they don't have to worry about taxes and payroll, things that are important to run a business, but aren't necessarily the focus of the arts, and let them do really creative work. And I think that we've seen that over the last 15 years since we've had the shared services model in Columbus. I think it's also increased collaboration. Groups feel closer together. They work closely together. We've seen some incredible things come out of that, Twisted being an example. And we're going to have Twisted 3 take place this coming September. We're excited about that. So, really, we're all about the arts, but there's a business side to us too. And this was just a way for all of us to come together and spend less money on administrative items and more on the art that we want to do to serve our community. And it has been, it's been a great model. It's been a model that we have shared with other communities, and it is now. Although our model isn't replicated exactly like we do it here, there are a lot more examples of collaboration across the country than there are when we started 15 years ago.
That's great, and we do like collaboration in Columbus. It's something that I think we see all across the community. Mayor Coleman, to go back to you, I know the Lincoln Theater is very special to you, and the role that you've played in helping with that renovation and like you say, in the whole community. And then I understand that you also were involved in bringing Festival Latino under CAPA's wing. Talk a little bit about why that's important. I mean, I know Columbus is a very welcoming and diverse city. Is that part of it? But why was that something that you were committed to do as mayor?
Well, let me just kind of talk about both of them together.
Thank you.
Both the Lincoln Theater and Festival Latino. First, let me thank CAPA years later for being the leader that you have been for so many years. When I decided that we need to put a stake in the ground and save Lincoln Theater, thus save a neighborhood, to turn back what I'll call systematic discrimination in a neighborhood, and to address what the arts always addresses, and that is the arts cuts across all racial boundaries and brings people together and unites. And so I said we're going to rejuvenate and bring back the Lincoln Theater. I knew nothing about renovating a theater. I knew nothing about operating a theater. I just knew it had to get done. But I turned to CAPA. I turned to Bill Connor, and I turned to Chad and to others. I called Angela Pace, who lived in the neighborhood, grew up in Poindexter Village, not far, well, right there. I said, look, we got to get this done and take this building that was very close to the point of being torn down as well. There were no fixtures. There were no chairs. There were no chandeliers. There were nothing. There was a hole in the ceiling where rain had fallen through for decades, a hole in the back wall. There was no stage. It was a dirt floor, and the building was near gone. In a neighborhood that had I-71 that was built in the 1960s to divide it, separate it from the rest of the city, a neighborhood that had a population in the 50s and 60s of 66,000 people, that in 2004 had a population of 16,000. Every other property was vacant and abandoned. It's like the world had turned their back to this neighborhood. And a theater that was the only theater black folks could go to, the only one. They could not come to Ohio Theater. They were not welcome at the Palace Theater, so they went to the Lincoln Theater. It needed to be saved. So instead of calling Ghostbusters, I called CAPA. And through some great work over here at this table, help out with it, Todd, yeah, I'm old, I can't remember names. CAPA joined in collaboration with the city to transform this once beautiful, then horrible, then beautiful again theater. And I think to one of the top theaters now, isn't it, in terms of attendance? Maybe?
It is.
Say yes.
We're at 10 years in. Over 300 days last year, there was something going on in the Lincoln Theater. That is an incredible amount of use for
There you go.
performing arts.
There you go. No, there you go. And so, like, Lincoln Theater rose out of crisis. That's what brought people together, and arts bring people together in times of crisis. And CAPA helped collaborate and turn that crisis into hope and opportunity. Same thing with Festival Latino. Same thing with the Ohio Theater. Crisis. So with Festival Latino, it was, I'm thinking it was during a time when the city was broke. We had no money. I was laying off left and right. I was about to lay off the police department and firefighters and, all kinds of things. And it was tough going. And the city, we had started the Festival Latino. We could not afford to put it on. We couldn't do it. We had to make very hard choices, and believe me, it was painful. So in a time of crisis, of terminating Festival Latino that brought together an entire group of people that heretofore was not addressed in this community. Folks that come in from Cleveland, from Youngstown, from Tennessee to Festival Latino, I had no choice but to eliminate it because we could not afford to put it on. So instead of calling Ghostbusters, I called CAPA. And I said, look, I got a choice here. I don't want to do this. I really don't want to do this. I really don't want to cut this wonderful festival. We have thousands of people come in. It was now a tourist thing, and people are spending money. And it was the epitome of diversity in our community. And again, CAPA stepped up and said, we got it. And they took Festival Latino, and they still have it to this very day. And it has become, again, a wonderful venue, a showcase of our diversity in the city of Columbus. And I want to thank CAPA once again.
We did finally learn just to quit answering the phone when the mayor called.
One of the things that I love about where CAPA is right now with the, celebrating 50 years, and we just had this great run of Hamilton, which I think kind of reintroduced a lot of people to CAPA. And if you haven't seen it, the lineup is out for the next season of Broadway in Columbus with some great shows coming: Dear Evan Hansen, Mean Girls, My Fair Lady, Jersey Boys, one of my favorites. But I'm wondering, with Hamilton, it just seems like it was made such an impact on the community. So, Chad, is there a Hamilton effect that CAPA has seen and is going to be building on in the coming years? And if so, how does that play out?
Sure. Yeah, the good news is there's life after Hamilton. So we've got a great season coming up. We're excited about that. I think there are really two different Hamilton effects, and one is fairly easy to track, and that's the number of subscribers are up, the number of people visiting the Broadway series are up. Because of Hamilton, they've been up a couple of years. And so now we see what happens on the back end of Hamilton. Subscription renewal is taking place, and what we know is that based on the pace of those renewals, we're going to end up with more subscribers at a regular level than we had before Hamilton came along. So it has been good for Broadway. It's raised awareness. The other effect that I think is equally or more important, and that is going to be a lot harder to track, is the effect that it has on the rest of the arts community. We had 64,000 people come through the theater for 24 performances of Hamilton. A lot of those folks had never been into the Ohio Theater before, and a lot of those folks had never been into a performing arts theater before. It doesn't matter to me if they come back to the Broadway series, if they go to the symphony, Pro Musica, opera. If they're now interested in the arts and interested in what they can see in our great venues, and they come back, buy a ticket for somebody else, I think that's a win for Columbus. And that is going to happen. I will just never quite be able to track the numbers on that. So I think it's incumbent on all of us as arts organizations to really push right now to make the community aware of what we've got while people are interested, while they remember what that experience was like, sitting down and experiencing a tremendous show with 2,800 people.
That is amazing. Larry, I want to ask you a question, but I also want to put the audience on notice here that we're going to go in a couple of minutes to the audience participation part of the program. So there's a microphone over on that side of the room, that you can begin lining up to the microphone so that you can ask your questions. So we'll get there in just a minute. Larry, I would imagine that the board tries to spend some time looking into the crystal ball to see what the challenges are, other than maybe not answering the phone when Mike Coleman calls. What other challenges do you and the board see for CAPA going forward?
Well, I'm sure people on the board all have different crystal balls they look into. And we talk about each other's crystal balls, but mine going forward is the concept of the importance in the coming world that is going to be so highly digital and so much even entertainment, kind of video games, all those kinds of things are going to be more and more pervasive. And what is going to be, I think, a desperate need in the coming decades for people is the experience of live performing arts, sitting and experiencing it as part of an audience. And it's an experience that people really crave, even if they don't know it, even if it's subconscious. And so I think that a role of a CAPA as a broad foundational type of arts organization, not a specific arts organization that does a specific art form and presents it, is to take the kind of broad perspectives of how we're going to deal with the changing world and preserve in it the importance of live entertainment.
And that takes me to one other question that I wanted to ask Mayor Coleman. Along these lines, I know that you've been very involved since leaving the mayor's office at the end of 2015 with the notion of the need for civility in our public discourse. And I think a lot of other people have kind of taken up that mantle as well. But is there a role that you see for CAPA and the arts community to help promote civility?
Sure there is. We were just joking at the table, talking about Hamilton, and they were very civil when they pulled out their guns and started shooting at each other at the end. But that's a lesson of history. People die from that. Yeah, I think certainly there is. I think civility cuts across every aspect of our community and should. And it should also cut across the arts and CAPA as well. And people talk about civility all the time, and you know, you're probably tired of hearing it. But what I would like to see more of is those who, as we observe incivil and uncivil behavior, and we see it everywhere. We see it in the White House. We see it in other places. Call it out. Don't be silent. Don't sit on your hands. You know, artists have always been activists as well, and it kind of married together. And I think the new activism in our community is going to really arise out of the artist community, I believe. And I think Columbus, the future of Columbus is going to be founded into arts and culture. One of the things Columbus has always struggled with was, who are we as a city? How do we represent ourselves around the country? What do we want people to know about our city? And I think that the real true future of our city is arts and culture and activism. You know, civility, civil rights movement came out of civility. That's where it was the embryo of. And I think arts and activism go hand in hand, and our city can be known going into the future and now as a place, as a center of art, the center of activism, the center of civility.
Excellent, thank you.
And Tom told me to say that. He's over there.
It is CMC's tradition to take audience questions, so we've got a couple of folks ready to go. Please make sure to state your name and ask your question. Avoid editorial comments, leave that to me, that's my job. And remember to end your time with a question. So if we can have the first question, please. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Gretchen Hummel, and I'm going to break your rule just for a second. If you have not been to the Lincoln Theater and you think you're an audiophile, or you are one, or you know an audiophile, I highly recommend that you look at the vast and variety of offerings of music performances at the Lincoln Theater. It has hands down the best acoustics of any theater I have ever been in, and the music performances, therefore, are amazing. All right, I'm done. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
I could speechify about my topic too, but I won't. I'll ask a question and then let one of you talk about it. I know that CAPA, because I am one, CAPA has more than 700 volunteers, and I would like to know what you think the importance of community volunteerism for CAPA is, and how you can promote more volunteers, because it's an aging group, and we could use more bodies. Thank you.
I think the story of CAPA's founding and the four original founders is impressive, but equally impressive to me is if you look back over the last 50 years, all of the folks from the community that it has taken to get us to where we're at today. It's volunteers, it's the union stagehands that work for us, it's the staff, board members. I imagine most of you are here today because you've got some connection to CAPA or have had over the last 50 years. To me, that's an impressive story, a community coming together, and the volunteers have been an important part of that throughout our entire 50 years. Last week was National Volunteer Month. We did a couple of clips to recognize our volunteers. I think the number is like 70,000 hours of volunteer service each year to put on all the shows that take place in our venues. We couldn't replace that with paid staff and still be a viable organization. The volunteers are the backbone of what we do at CAPA, and we are always looking for more volunteers. So if anybody's interested, yeah, please reach out. It's a great opportunity to see shows and be the face of CAPA with the public as well. So yes, I thank you to all of the volunteers for what they do for us each and every day.
I would add that in 1969, in September of 69, when we started operations, I said we had hired a staff of 4 to manage the stage manager, house manager, executive directors. Well, we also had to have, in those days, many dozens of volunteers, and we had them immediately. From the day we opened, the ushers have been volunteers, and you can't run a theater without the ushering corps.
Great. All right, our next question, please.
Yes, my name is Mike Shattuck, and I work for Mayor Ginther, and Mayor Ginther is the honorary chair of Columbus Sister Cities. Everybody has an invitation on your table. May 15th, a Paganini violin is coming to Columbus, Ohio. 276 years old. It's only been in the United States 2 times, New York and San Francisco. It's coming to Columbus, Ohio, and it'll be here on May 15th. My question for this panel is, how significant is this, and what does it mean for you, for Columbus, to be hosting this international treasure?
Well, I think you said it well. This violin has been to the East Coast, to the West Coast, And that's it. And now it's coming to Columbus. I think that tells us what a special opportunity this is for our city, and we're certainly looking forward to it. It's going to spend some time at the museum, is my understanding, before we have the concert. So this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I can't remember now the last time it was here, but it was over 10 years ago, I think, and here I mean in the U.S. So yeah, we expect to have people from all over the country coming in to take advantage of this. So this is the kind of opportunity we want for Columbus, something that you can see here. You can't go anywhere else in the country to see. So this is going to be pretty special.
All right, thank you. Next question without an editorial comment.
I wasn't going to give you one.
Great, thank
As a
you.
former chair of CMC's board, I know I don't give an editorial comment. I'm Kathy Fox, and my question is, how will CAPA going forward in the next 50 years address the challenge of being the city's arts facility landlord for performing arts? You have an Ohio theater that's 50 years from being saved, and a Southern theater that's 20 years from being restored, and a Lincoln theater that's a decade from being restored. How do you generate the excitement to maintain all those facilities and deal with the fact that all of those improvements are aging?
Yeah, I think our spaces are an opportunity more than a challenge in many ways, and I am excited about the future of what we've got in the arts, including our facilities. Our community is very generous with their support. We just finished last fall a $6 million renovation of the Palace Theater that was supported by the community, and so I expect that we will continue to have a good story to tell, that the arts are going to continue to grow in Columbus, and a piece of that will be the theaters. It's the spaces where that art is created. So I'm very optimistic that the city will continue to support what we need as an arts community in order to make sure that we can do great things here in Columbus. And I've got to take a minute, I guess, to piggyback on that and channel Tom for a minute and say the ticket fee is a part of that for continuing to have a great arts community here in Columbus. We've been talking about more public funding for 15 years. We've done more studies than any of us care to think about. And this is the solution that we've got. Maybe it's not perfect, but it's a solution we've got. We've already got it past the finish line. They're just trying to take it away from us at this point. We need to make sure that we hold on to this ticket fee, and we have a way to support things like the violin coming to Columbus and a lot of other great programming that takes place here, and make sure that if we're a great arts community now, that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we continue to be a great arts community and a center for art in the U.S.
Can I? Yeah. And I'd like to piggyback on that as well. You know, I talked about artist activism, and now's the time to really see that come into fruition, because I see when cities become complacent, when communities become complacent, and they think they got it, somebody, in this case, out-of-towners, come in and try to tell us what to do in our community about decisions we make in our community. And in this case, what has happened is our community has decided that arts is important, it needs to be sustained and maintained for future generations. And when young kids are served like at King Arts, when they're served at King Arts, it's because of the vibrancy of our arts community, but that can be taken away, just like the fire at Notre Dame. Once it's gone, you say, what happened? And so it's not just about CAPA, it's about all of us in this room and outside this room to maintain a sense of urgency that 50 years ago you saved the Ohio Theater. Well, you know, you got to keep it going. And you have the Lincoln Theater. That's 10 years old now. You got to keep it going. And this is what the arts fee, ticket fee does. Self-sustaining user fee to sustain the arts in the city of Columbus.
All right, our next question.
Yes, my name is Mike O'Brien, and I first want to thank you for the beautiful work that was done on the Palace Theater, making it much nicer than it's always been, and especially to thank you for the additional legroom on the main floor for those of us who have bad knees. That is so greatly appreciated. Okay, my question is in particular about the Palace. It was originally saved by Catherine Levesque, but became part of CAPA. Can you tell me the history of how that came together? Who approached who, and what were the details that had to be worked out for that to become a major part of CAPA now?
Yes. Kathy Levesque, when she took over the business after her husband was killed in the airplane crash, looked at the Lincoln Levesque Tower and the theater with it, and from a pure business standpoint, what was suggested to her by all of her advisors was to tear down the Palace Theater and to put in its place parking to support the office building. Makes perfectly good sense. Kathy rejected that, and she decided, using the money, her money and the business and whatever other money outside, I don't know how that was split up, she went in and she did the necessary renovations at that time to keep it operational and arranged to operate it for a number of years. That burden became eventually too much for her, as it would for almost any of us. And so she looked at the concept of having CAPA take it over. I can tell you she was very nervous about it. It was her baby. And she worried, because I talked with her many times on this, she worried that somehow CAPA would have as its first love child the Ohio Theater, and would not give as much attention to the Palace. But she looked at it and she decided that wasn't going to be the case, that CAPA could really do this, and she donated that theater, an operating theater that's worth tens of millions of dollars, and she donated it to CAPA. And we, yes. And I can tell you that, and we of course, we put her on our board of trustees so she could monitor this. She did, and she grew to really love the idea. She saw that we took care of that theater and loved it every bit as much as the other theaters that we have, and it worked out very well.
That's great. I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, my name's Marie Trudeau, and thank you for your stories today. I am going to whine just a little bit. I can't believe not everyone in Central Ohio has been to the Ohio Theater, but not everyone can afford live performances. I went to the Cream tribute a few weeks ago, which was really a fun night, and the tickets were only $25. But they cost me $41 a piece because of those darn ticket fees. So are the ticket masters of the world, it seems like it gets worse and worse all the time. Are they going to continue to gouge us on ticket prices? Thank you.
I think that's a great point, and certainly we get a lot of feedback on that, so that is something we're evaluating, is our relationship with Ticketmaster versus other ticketing systems. There's a lot of technology, there's a lot of staff time that goes into running the ticketing system, so I mean there's a cost associated with it, but we're working on ways to lower that cost. I think I'm especially sensitive to it on the lower price tickets for folks that are buying $20 or $25 tickets, and the fees end up being 40% of the price of the ticket. That's not reasonable, and so we're exploring ways that we can address that, because we do want the theaters to be accessible to everyone. That's very important to us, and certainly it's about total cost for the end user, not just about the ticket price. So hopefully we'll have good news to share on that front soon. I'd also point out, the movie series that's been around now for 50 years is a great opportunity for folks to see the Ohio Theater at a very reasonable price. Tickets are like $5. And actually this summer, to celebrate the 50th anniversary opening weekend, tickets are only going to be 50 cents for Casablanca. So I probably wasn't supposed to announce that, so it's a secret. I think it's June 14th through 16th, I think, is opening weekend, right around there. So we're excited about that. You get to hear the organ, see the Ohio Theater. So we try to create accessibility points. So even if someone can't come and see a live performance, come and see a piece of CAPA history, a movie series that has been around since CAPA was formed 50 years ago.
I hope you all found today's forum enjoyable and enlightening. Let's thank our sponsors and partners, the Tom E. Daly Foundation, Puffin Foundation West, the Columbus Dispatch, and Greater Columbus Sister Cities International, and our speakers, Larry Fisher, Michael Coleman, Chad Whittington, and Mary Yost. And thank you all for being here. Hope to see you next week.